Today we officially kick off our journey with the Cleveland Browns as we've got our first off-season on the schedule. Before we get there, we got to finish up the season though. We just passed conference championship weekend and you had Baltimore and KC with the Chiefs headed to another Super Bowl. And then you have the Lions over the Eagles in the NFC Championship. I can absolutely see this being the Final Four and this being the result in the Final Four. You've got Lions Chiefs headed to the Super Bowl here. Let's see who can prevail. We're in Pro Bowl week right now. I don't think we need to spend too much time in that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the yearly awards. MVP is Lamar Jackson. Saquon Barkley all the way down at number 10 on this list. Disrespectful. Jalen Hurts at 3 with Barkley at 10 is funny. Coach of the Year goes to Dan Campbell with Nick Sirianni behind him. If you go to the Conference Player Awards, you have Jamar Chase for Offensive Player in the AFC. Saquon Barkley wins Offensive Player of the Year in the NFC. That makes sense. Defensive Player of the Year in the AFC is Nick Bonito. Okay. A little bit of an unexpected pick there, but Myles Garrett comes in third place there. Brian Thomas wins Rookie of the Year over Bo Nix. He must have had an insane final stretch to the season to get that, or maybe Bo Nix just threw a ton of picks. I know Madden doesn't love it when a quarterback throws picks. Amari Lassiter is your Defensive Rookie of the Year. And then here are the best players at every position. We do get Best Defensive Lineman in Myles Garrett. No surprise, he's a beast. And there you have it. Now let's go over to the NFC, where Defensive Player of the Year is Xavier McKinney. We have Jaden Daniels winning Rookie of the Year over Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison. No surprise there. Jared Verse is your Defensive Rookie of the Year. Quinyon Mitchell not listed, though that won't be the case in real life. Just he doesn't have a lot of counting stats for Madden purposes. Best quarterback is Jalen Hurts. Okay. Best running back, Saquon Barkley. And here we're just going to start going through these. Eagles winning a lot of awards here. As an Eagles fan, I'm not going to be complaining. There's the awards. Now let's go ahead and see who will be the official winner of the Super Bowl here. Kansas City Chiefs versus Detroit Lions. Should be a fun game. And the winner of the 2024-2025 season Super Bowl is... This takes far too long to simulate a single week here. What's going on? There you have it. 42-7. The Lions absolutely put a big time blowout on the Chiefs to wrap up the season. And here's all the stuff kind of in one screen here. I think if there was only one Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley would get it over Jamar Chase. But I am, biased, of course, in that. But Saquon did end up going for over 2,000 yards in the sim in this season. But you've got your Super Bowl MVP going to Patrick Mahomes. Oh, no, it was 42-7 for the Chiefs. Looked like it was the other way around on the previous screen. So the Chiefs have won 3 straight for the first time in NFL history. Good for them. Somebody we're going to have to topple here at some point in this series, although I don't think we're quite have those aspirations yet. For the most part, I think I'm going to be avoiding scenarios in this game. I think we have just a scenario here in Madden 25 where they really did not do this well. I think the scenarios are quite poor in this game, and so for the most part, I will avoid them. This one's a pretty good one, though. This is a tough decision, though. Like, Myles Garrett is so good that he doesn't need off-season workouts, whereas Okoronkwo is maybe not good enough to care about his off-season workouts. It's no guarantee that we get a good edge, though, so there's a chance that Okoronkwo will be starting for us, or at least playing some sort of role for us next season. So if he is, why not get him to be a little bit better? Let's see what we can do. He wants to focus on his pass rush moves, getting off of blocks. That's exactly what we want him to work on. Get better as a pass rusher. And so he'll be checking in with us at the start of next year to see how he did. Not going to do the press conferences specifically. Those are always just, I think they were really poorly done in this game. I got to be honest. I think there's other things we can do to make this series interesting without having to use these scenarios. I'm also going to quickly go through the retirements here. Just call out any big names. A couple of big names there for the Vikings. You have the Honey Badger retiring, Zach Ertz retiring, Adam Thielen retiring. We saw Aaron Rodgers retire, Scherf, Trent Williams retires, Kirk Cousins, Darius Slay, Lane Johnson, and Brandon Graham. So the Eagles got a pretty massive hit here. Also saw it before. Jason Peters finally retire. Michael Thomas retires. Von Miller retires. So a lot of big-time names hanging up their cleats after the first season here in the series. Before we hop into free agency, I want to give you a full look at this draft class, kind of showing you who I have my eyes on, kind of what position groups are strengths in different portions of this draft class. Let's start with round one, where pretty much we are looking exclusively at pass rush and quarterback in this spot. I think the round one is good for those two spots. Other spots that I would love to draft, like wide receiver, like offensive line, I just don't see any value in the first round at those spots. So those will have to wait for either later on in the draft or for next season. Let's start with Glenn Davis, who I think is the best quarterback prospect in this year's draft. He does have round 1 to 2 talent, so we know for sure he's not a generational player. I never really thought that was going to be on the table for Glenn, but now we know for sure. Athleticism is all there. Great throw power, good speed, great acceleration. You love to see that. He has good traits here with stands tall in the pocket, and is always aware of pressure. 3/4 and quick throwing motion, so it doesn't look like the throwing motion will be a problem for him. A throw under pressure, A throw on the run, A break sack. He's good at kind of avoiding pressure. He's good at, making the off-platform plays, which is kind of the buzz around the league when you're looking for quarterbacks. Doesn't really have anything below a B that you truly care about other than injury. That being at a D, and stamina as well. Stamina and injury is a tough spot for him, but all the quarterback skills are A's and B's. You'd love maybe a couple more A's for a guy that you want to start your franchise with, but you don't get that every year. You're not going to get, this godsend quarterback prospect. You got to work with what you have. And I certainly think, he's still very, very worthy of being a top 5 selection in this class. We pick at number 3. The mock drafts have him going number 1 overall to the Giants, though. So if that remains the case after free agency, he will not be available to us. We have one other quarterback on our board, and that is Paul Kirkland. We know he has around 2 to 3 talent. There's going to be a couple overall lower than Glenn Davis here. He also doesn't quite have the traits where you want them to. He has oblivious sense of pressure. That's not particularly great. He's a little bit slower, but otherwise the physicals are all the same. I think they might have even had like the same 40-yard dash, but the ratings over on the left are the best indicator of what they will be. He does have 2 A's for his accuracy, though. That he's got that going for him. He also has terrible injury, but ultimately we know the talent's a little bit worse on Paul Kirkland overall wise, and we know the traits aren't quite as there. So this one's more of a toss-up as to whether or not he would be worth spending a top 3 pick on. I think There's still enough good there to like, but there's enough to make you hesitant where it comes into question. Last episode, I brought up the topic of whether or not we should leave the door open for starting Deshaun Watson for one more year. You're never guaranteed that there's going to be any good quarterbacks in the next year's class, of course, but the vote said that we should leave the door open. So my thoughts on the quarterback prospects at number 3 overall. Glenn Davis, absolutely going to be on the table if he's there at number 3. Paul Kirkland, though, I don't think we're going to be taking him in the first round of this draft. He is the 3rd quarterback, though, so if 3 quarterbacks don't go in the first round and he falls to the 2nd, I could see us taking him there. At number 3, there's really 2 edge prospects to talk about that I think are the top 2 in this class. First up is James Minor, who projects to be a top 5 pick in this class. Now, he's kind of a one-trick pony here. He does have A finesse moves, but D block shed and C power move. He's going to be kind of only a finesse move player. C to F injury and C to F stamina. I wish we knew a little bit more about that, because C is fine, F is terrible. So I wish we knew those, but he also has absolutely elite athleticism, and that's what makes him, worthy of a top pick. Is even though he only kind of has one trick right now, he does it extremely well with great athleticism and great skill. The guy that, for my money, even though he's ranked as I think the edge 2 in this class, I would have him as edge 1, is Daniel Gibson. He's a year younger, he's a little bit bigger. Because of that, he doesn't have the top speed, but he has elite strength and elite acceleration. So with that combination, I'll take the good speed. 34 reps is really good for an edge prospect. You got to remember that these defensive end players are competing with interior defensive ends for the combine ranking. So out of the edge prospects, I'm sure he's number 1 in bench press in this class. A awareness, A power moves, but also has the B finesse move. Unfortunately, he might be just as bad at defending the run with C to F block shed. We don't know 100% on that. Also C to F injury. So I'd love to get to know these 2 edge prospects a little bit more, because I think one of those guys is going to be the pick if Glenn Davis does indeed go at number 1. So even though we know most of their pass rush skills, I think at least in the case of Daniel Gibson, because I'm pretty confident he'll be there at 3, he'll be one of the guys that we focus in on and try to get up to 100% prior to the start of the draft, just to have as much information as possible going for us there. So if we end up going quarterback number 1, I'm not opposed to trading back into the first round to get another edge prospect. And there are 3 guys really to talk about here. And they are Alex Reagan here, who's a pretty good athlete here. A awareness, B block shed, A power moves. So he's actually pretty solid at defending the run alongside, being a decent pass rusher. So he has that going for him. Just not quite the athlete. And he's a year older than Gibson, which is why I would have Gibson over him. But I'd honestly consider him pretty similarly to Minor. I think I still have Minor a little bit over him because of his elite athleticism. You also have you have Brian Yates here, 22 years old, another finesse pass rusher with great speed and elite acceleration. The solid strength only is kind of what you worry about with him as to how good he will defend the run. And then lastly here, probably the guy that's going to go last out of all these prospects is Jesse Mullen. He's 21 years old and a great athlete. He just doesn't have any A's. So that's why he's more of a late round 1, maybe even somebody that we can consider at the top of the 2nd round if he is there. Not going to go through every single prospect that I have on my board. That would take forever, but I just wanted to go through kind of the options early in this class, give you guys all the information that I have there. I would have loved to put some receivers on the board for round 1. I'd love to put some offensive linemen. Just didn't see anybody that was worth it there. There's some guys with some skills on the offensive line that just don't have the athleticism. I think this is a really bad wide receiver class. You see, I have a couple here on the board in the round 2 to 3 category, but they're actually not that good. We can just go through the wide receiver rankings here, so it'll actually show us the noteworthy stats. But you see some A's and B's here, but there's just people that aren't athletic, there's people that are kind of old. It's not a good receiver class, unfortunately, even though that's one of the positions I want to draft the most. I have a couple on my board, but honestly, they're probably, out of all the prospects I have that are round 2 to 3 projected on my board, they're probably the worst. Lance Linton is somebody that I'm very interested in. Yeah, he's only a solid athlete, but he's a really good pass blocker at the offensive line spot. Losing Jedrick Wills leaves a gaping hole in the offensive line, and I'd love to fill it with a guy like Linton here. There are some other good offensive line prospects. I think around 2 to 4, you're going to see a lot of good offensive linemen go, and I think we're going to take at least 2 players. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 offensive linemen on our board for between rounds 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 projection. So I think that's a position group we'll be targeting in the middle rounds. We do have a couple of off-ball linebackers, Marquise Favors and Casey Kinley. Favors going to be a little bit better in coverage. Kinley will be a better run stopper. Only 1 running back on our board, and that's Matthias Golson, and he's honestly not that good either. Just the playmakers in this draft just aren't very good. He has really good ratings, and he's young. He just isn't that good of an athlete. He's not terrible either. I mean, he did run a sub 4.5. But you look for ball carrier vision in a series like this. He has a B break tackle, A carrying, stiff arm, and trucking. So he's a power back. Just don't ask him to be really anything else other than a power back on top of it, because he's not going to be able to provide that for you. Not a pass catcher, not very agile or anything like that. And then a couple of defensive tackles here. They're both speed rusher archetypes. We have that in Mike Hall, kind of. So I don't, I was looking for a good run-stopping defensive tackle. It just wasn't there. And then day 3, really underwhelming. That's no surprise. It's day 3, but a quarterback option that at least has solid accuracy. I'll just show you him here. If we don't take quarterback in the first round, I could see us just taking a swing at him, maybe in the 4th with B accuracies across the board and not terrible awareness. It's not going to be good because day 3 quarterbacks are never good, but at least, we even have him guaranteed as a day 3 talent, but it'd at least be a dart throw we could take a quarterback. Then Mario Bradley just has speed, that's all he has. And then kickers and punters. So those aren't really exciting enough to talk about. That's kind of the draft. Quarterback, edge rusher at the top, offensive line heavy in the mid rounds, maybe a couple linebackers sprinkled in there, and then with the day 3 picks, we'll just be filling in probably backup roles. I don't see any really stud day 3 picks from what I've scouted so far. That is the draft class that we have to work with for our first off season. We're now on the player re-sign screen, and we do have a little bit more wiggle room. It's showing now 17 mil instead of 5. But Nick Chubb suddenly doesn't really like the chances of coming back to Cleveland. He's also severely regressed down to an 87 overall, all the way down to star dev. So I think that makes you, more than happy to let him go, even though he does, at 87 overall, technically still, he's somebody that we can re-sign. I think letting him hit free agency is the right thing to do in this spot. Everybody else just doesn't really want to come back, and I don't mind kind of filling out the depth of this roster with players that I've handpicked myself. So we're going to let them all go. Michael Dunn wants to return. Sorry, 63 overall. I think I can do better than that, or at least the same as that with a younger player. So nobody coming back in the re-sign period. We're going to have some holes to fill in this off season. I talked about last episode the fact that Joe Bitonio had a good chance of being a trade candidate this season because he was getting paid $15.7 million, and we could save over 10 with some sort of trade. But if you look at it here, the really only viable option we have in free agency to, not necessarily replace him, but get a starting caliber offensive lineman is Ryan Kelly here, who's very similar. They're one overall off. They're both kind of reaching their mid-30s here, and the money that Ryan Kelly has, with the stipulation that we're required to offer the player-friendly APY is $14 million, which all of a sudden we're not saving any money by going from Bitonio to Ryan Kelly. If you take a look at the rest of the offensive line options here, there's a couple of good players, especially at left tackle, just none of them want to be in Cleveland. So that hurts our ability to really bring anybody in there that could start. And really the only starting caliber offensive lineman on the market for us right now is Ryan Kelly. And again, that just doesn't really save us any sort of money. So I think, although I was definitely leaning towards trading away Bitonio, he's going to be back for another season in Cleveland because that's actually the best money case scenario for us. Now, one position we absolutely have to add at is receiver. Talked about how bad this receiver class is, and we lost Elijah Moore from a wide receiver core that was already not great to begin with. He has no interest in coming back because we do not have a franchise quarterback. That makes sense. E.2 Atwell, however, does have some desire in coming over to Cleveland here, and they're really similar players. E.2's obviously a lot smaller, but I think this could be a deal that we make here to replace Elijah Moore at the receiver spots. Whether we draft a new rookie quarterback or not, our receiver situation right now, our wide receiver 2 is Cedric Tillman, who I think he's a bad player in real life by any means, but in Madden, that's not going to cut it for your wide receiver 2. So let's go to player friendly. I still like keeping it a 2-year deal for 2-2, but a 2-year 13 will be our first free agency offer here. We're the only ones offering. It's a strong offer. I think we might get him. As for the free agency quarterback situation, we're already so tight on money that we couldn't probably really get anybody of note here. Justin Fields would have been fun to give him another chance. Daniel Jones could have at least been slightly intriguing. He just barely didn't have enough. If we got a mentor, though, that would push him into the yellow if we wanted to go for that. The money he wants, though, would make it so we'd have to sign a mentor on him, and that would be the entirety of our cap space. The highest overall guy that we could just get outright is Aiden O'Connell, which just is not intriguing enough. I'd honestly rather start Deshaun Watson than Aiden O'Connell, if I'm being honest, and that's saying something because I don't want to start Deshaun Watson. I think the best option for us would be getting a mentor and then getting Daniel Jones if we were to make a move in free agency at the quarterback spots. I'm not convinced that's the best way to go, especially because their expected value per year isn't what we would have to pay them with the player-friendly contract if we were to sign them in this first period. So as for right now, we're going to leave quarterback untouched in free agency. So this is weird with Sam Hubbard here because I don't think you're actually ever going to be able to have more than orange interest with him because he wants to be close to home in Ohio, but he doesn't like anything else about Ohio. So even though he's only orange, I think I'm going to allow myself to pursue him if I want. That's pretty much the entirety of our cap if we do. But just because his motivations make no sense, I think I'm going to allow myself to go after him. And he's pretty much in the yellow already. We have Chauncey Golston, but now you're already getting to a player who's just as good as Okoronkwo. I think the only guy that could be a slight upgrade at all would be Sam Hubbard. He's not great, but he'll play the run decently well. And this is our best option at the edge, I think, in free agency, which is just truly saying something. We don't have a lot of players interested in us. That's really hurting us. And, I'd love to be able to go after a guy like Chase Young, but he wants a big market. That could have been, a fun potential edge to sign. Michael Hoyt, but is that, an upgrade at all? At the linebacker spot, I don't know if anybody's an upgrade over Jordan Hicks for this upcoming year. So really limited in free agency here in year one, which is why I'm considering going after Sam Hubbard. Yes, it takes the rest of our cap, but what else are we going to use our cap on is the question. So player friendly, we would have to free up a little bit of room if we wanted to go to Sam Hubbard with a 1 or 2 year deal. I think that could probably work though. So let's see if we can get it done. Released a couple of low-end guys, and now we have just enough to offer Sam Hubbard a 1 year deal. This is a guy who, if we draft the edge at number 1 overall, you're not mad at sending, Sam Hubbard a 1 year deal, mostly just because what else were we going to do with our free agency money? If this was, truly sacrificing another position, then yeah, you could be mad about it. But I don't think we really had enough money to do anything at quarterback, and the options just were pretty terrible everywhere else across the board. Not a massive upgrade should he sign, which I think he will, but I think a good enough upgrade over Okoronkwo to be willing to do it for 1 year here. So 2 targets here is all we have room for. Tutu Atwell to replace Elijah Moore, and trying to make a slight upgrade at the edge spot, just so that we, for sure, at least put some assets at that edge spot, because I do think if we don't end up taking one at number 3, I don't think there are good mid-round edge options. I think it's like first round or bust in this draft, unless that one guy falls to the top of the second round at the edge spot. So we will evaluate here, and both players will sign to the Cleveland Browns. We've got ourselves a receiver and an edge. That's all we've got for free agency. Very little to spend, and I think we did probably about as good as we could with it. During the final week of free agency here, we will offer Kareem Hunt for a return here. He's kind of slow, and he's definitely old, but we only have 2 running backs on the roster, and we could barely fit him under the cap. So we'll see if he decides to come to the squad, and he does. So that'll be the 3rd free agent we get here. We will now quickly just go through kind of the guys that are moving on to other teams here in free agency. Nick Chubb will be a New York Giant. So the year after not paying Saquon Barkley, they go ahead and pay Nick Chubb. That's really funny. Smith will stay in the NFC East here. Garrett Bowles to the Rams. Khalil Mack to the Lions, as well as Amari Cooper. Bakhtiari remains unsigned. Would have loved that, but we just don't have the money. Ryan Kelly to the Packers. Ricard to the Vikings. And the Lions somehow have all this money to go after all these players. I just don't quite get it, but they do. Kamara goes to the Raiders. Will Hernandez could have been an interesting pickup for us. We could have, let's see, he wants about 9.3 per year. So we wouldn't save a ton of money by going from Bitonio to Hernandez, but we could save a little, especially because we could probably get him on the cheap because he has no offers. He also has no interest, so I don't think we can actually get him that cheap. We'll just stick with Bitonio for this season. Jordan Mason to the Cowboys. Rico Dowdle to the Bengals. And there you have the top free agents and their destinations this year. 2 offensive linemen remain unsigned that are definitely starting caliber. We'll see if they get an offer once preseason comes around, which I suspect they will. That officially brings us to the NFL draft, where Cleveland Browns fans across the nation are praying that the Giants will not take Glenn Davis number 1 overall, but those prayers would not be answered, as the best quarterback in the class goes where all the mock drafts were predicting he would go, number 1 overall. The Browns front office were hoping that the Giants would either not go quarterback or just prefer one of the quarterbacks over Davis. But the apple of their eye at the signal caller position goes before they have a chance to draft him. Obviously, Madden would have let us trade up to number 1 overall if we had to. But as I stated, this is a heavy emphasis on realism in this series. And if the Giants liked him at number 1, they just weren't going to trade out of that pick. And So really the only quarterback prospect that I really liked in this class is off the board, putting us in a tough spot. We desperately need quarterback. And the one that I actually thought was worth a top 5 pick is off the board. That mostly takes the decision, I think, out of our hands. We could take one of the other round 1 projected quarterbacks in this spot, but we know their talents aren't as good, and I don't like their traits. So ultimately, do you force quarterback just because you really don't want to start Deshaun Watson, or do you take who you think is the best player in the entire class, also at a position of need? And the final decision was to take Daniel Gibson, the number 2 player in all of the draft here. I don't know why we didn't get the kind of pre-draft animation for him. Hidden developments for our first pick of the series. 90 strength, 91 acceleration, only 82 top speed. We hope that can go up a bit, but an excellent pick. Unfortunately, that leaves the quarterback position pretty much in dire straits for us in this class. None of the other 2 quarterbacks fell down to number 2. Snell did get a off-season kind of storyline for his great pro day workout, but I think it's a little too early for him. Instead, let's go to Lance Linton here. I think the number 2 need on this team behind only quarterback is left tackle. He's only an average athlete, but look at these ratings. I don't know how he's only around 2 to 3 talent. That's going to result in kind of a low 70s overall player. But look at these passing grades. A awareness, A on all of his pass blocking, and then his run blocking is not even bad either. Only 21 years old. Because we literally have no one to start at left tackle, I think it has to be Lance Linton here with our 2nd round pick. This time we would get the pre-draft animation. Kevin Stefanski excited to have somebody that can start on the left side. He was listed at right tackle here, but he played left tackle at college. Thought by many scouts to be a better right tackle at the next level. But he'll be sticking on the left side for us. Specializes as a pass protector. But I think it's his average athleticism, as you can see, just 85 strength, 65 speed. Not terrible, but just average. And that's got to be what's bringing his overall down, because his blocking ratings are tremendous. But if you want a round 1 talent at offensive line, look no further than Matt Gleason here. And this is where I think we consider our 1 trade up allowed in the class is back into the 2nd round, so we can get a starter at center. Ethan Pochich is a low 70s overall. He's in his late 20s. It just isn't going to work there, I think, long term. And we have a guy that we know is going to be very good. 49 was the pick that I tried to move up to here. The only center rated above him went off the board at 48. And while the Seattle Seattle Seahawks, sorry, I'm in NBA mode, nickeled and dimed us, we eventually got a deal done. Seattle's best center was a 68 overall, so I felt like it had to be 49th pick. Gave up a lot, but for Matt Gleason, I think it's more than worth it. The 19th best player in the entire draft. We had to give up 2 4s and a 7 to get him, but 2 4s and a 7 isn't going to get you a guy as good as Matt Gleason, hardly ever. He does struggle a lot more with his run blocking, but I think that's going to be an excellent pick for us. We wouldn't pick again until the end of the 3rd round, and the options on the board, I think, were honestly pretty slim. We're talking about kind of guys that were going to go in that range. We had 5 players left on the board. We had 1 round 2 to 3 wide receiver in Denard Smith. I don't think he's actually very good at all. I only put him on the board. I have a day 3 grade on him. He just can't run routes at all. Casey Kinley, I think if you're talking about just skill-wise, it was probably the best player available here. Outside linebacker with only B-zone coverage did worry me a little bit. I think B-zone coverage for an outside linebacker can be pretty terrible. Didn't need center because we took it before. There's also the glaring need of quarterback. The number 1 need coming into the offseason. We still haven't taken one. B's across the board on accuracy, as well as that good pro day scenario, made me interested in that pick, but I wanted to use our 1 trade down at this point in the draft just to recoup as much value as I could. I could only get a 5th rounder next year, but that's better than nothing. And I think the best we were going to get. Everybody but the receiver and the quarterback was off the board just 12 picks later. We only moved down 12 picks. All the guys went in that scenario, except for Sean Snell, who ultimately I decided to take the risk on, get some sort of quarterback competition, So it wasn't just Deshaun Watson and DTR, hoping that scenario would give him hidden development, but it did not. He rose up the draft boards because of his pro day, but still only normal development. 196 in true value. Not very good. For the rest of these day 3 picks, I didn't have anybody else on my board, so I kind of had to go off my board here. Good athleticism with A-zone coverage had me draft Philip Tolbert here in the 5th round, but ultimately not a great pick there. Kind of just went with the positions that we didn't have enough players on the roster. I only had 3 linebackers coming into the class. Needed more of those. I also only had 2 tight ends. I need a minimum of 3. And because we weren't going to have any cap space coming out of the draft, I couldn't really count on UDFAs. So I had to use day 3 to kind of fill in the roster spots that I needed. That would give us a 5th linebacker there. And then the final pick in the class, we only had 3 tackles. And Emmanuel Mayweather, B awareness with some good athleticism. That's enough for me to take him in the 7th rounds, finishing the draft. Let's see just how we did in our first draft here. I think we did well in days 1 and 2, but the day 3, we'll get there. But our first pick of the series will be Daniel Gibson along the edge. Getting a partner in crime for Myles Garrett was obviously a big time need. I wish we were in a spot where we could have taken Glenn Davis. I would have loved to have a new quarterback for this season, even if the weapons wouldn't have been there yet for him. Him going number 1, just out of our control. And so didn't force the quarterback. We can see what those other 2 quarterbacks were, and maybe if we should have taken those guys over Daniel Gibson. But 91 acceleration, 90 strength, 78 power move, 76 finesse move for the 21-year-old player is an awesome starting point for him. Injury and stamina could be better, of course, but they're not terrible by any means. So Daniel Gibson improving on that edge across Myles Garrett, just getting a better defensive line around him was a big time priority for me. It was probably my 2nd biggest need, maybe 3rd. We had left tackle as a massive need with the departure of Jedrick Wells, but 2nd or 3rd biggest need, getting such a good player at it was really good. And then we'd come back with that other big time need at the tackle spot with Lance Linton, who's going to be a 73 overall to start. I think he looks pretty dang good, if I'm being honest. The base run block at 75 is good. You need to get the run block power and finesse up. But as a pass blocker, he's really good. I think just kind of his average athleticism was what's holding his overall back. But I'm more fine with that at offensive tackle. You don't get a lot of double teams and up to the 2nd level as much with tackles. So I think a little bit lower speed and strength is more fine at tackle than it is on the interior. So I think Lance Linton has a chance to be a really good offensive lineman for us for the duration of this series. Also just 21 years old. And we continue the 21-year-old trend here with Matt Gleason, who's going to be a 75 overall pass protector out of the draft. Really good athleticism here and solid strength. So I think that run blocking will be able to come along for Matt Gleason. Just got to get, the run blocking so he can be a more well-balanced player, but he can come in and be a solid pass protector and upgrade over Ethan Pocic from year 1. We're going to have 2 rookies starting along our offensive line, which I think will help us have hopefully a better offensive line than what Cleveland had last season. Now we get to the day 3 picks, and yes, the quality is a bit lower here. Sean Snell ends up being a 66 overall. That's not good by any means, but with Deshaun Watson being just a 71 and this guy being a lot younger, I think it's a quarterback competition for us heading into the year. 89 throw power is good enough. He's got good enough accuracies across the board. Not going to throw well under pressure at all. Not going to get out of sacks. So that's the stuff you have to worry about with him. But if Kevin Stefanski can have him, be a guy who's playing within structure, getting quick reads out of his hands, that can be something that I think can work for him. But obviously quarterback is going to be a massive need going into year 2 for this football team. Trigger happy sense of pressure is just gonna even further make this guy not be a good under pressure quarterback, but at least he's gonna get rid of the ball quickly. which is better than maybe like Oblivious, which I think will result in a lot of sacks and stuff. So Sean Snell, will he be quarterback 1? Let me know who you would start, Sean Snell or Deshaun Watson. Who's your QB1? Philip Tolbert's just going to be a backup linebacker. We drafted these 2 linebackers literally because we only have 3 linebackers on the squad, so we needed more. He can run. That's all you could say about him right now, is he can run a bit, and it's not even that good that he can run. So under normal circumstances, might not even make the roster, but because we only have 5 LBs total after the draft, he's going to make it. Let's talk about our other linebacker right here, Tyler Lowry. He's a bit better. He has a little bit more in the way of tackle ability and stuff like that, but it's not that much better, honestly. So Tyler Lowry, those 2 are our backup linebackers. So we got to pray for the health of our linebacking core, because you don't really want either of those guys playing. Same with Derek Crowder. You don't really want this guy playing. He can kind of run, and that was kind of the theme. And in the day 3, I didn't really find anybody that I really liked on day 3. I'm sure there's some guys that I missed that we can go over here in just a couple minutes. But if you don't find anybody you like, at least find somebody who's a decent athlete and let the other stuff develop while they sit on the bench. And then Emmanuel Mayweather, a 65 overall tackle in the 7th round. I'm actually going to call that a pretty big dub. Injury and stamina is kind of low on him, which is maybe why he lasted that long. But solid ratings for a 7th round pick for sure. I'm going to call that probably the best pick of day 3. He and Snell are the guys that more solid. I think everybody else is pretty rough. But we added to the trenches in this draft. I think that was a massive need for Cleveland. Apart from a quarterback, I think the trenches was really where you needed to improve. You also needed to improve the playmaker positions. We couldn't really do that at all. Our only attempt was a 58 overall tight end in the end of the 6th round. So good thing we signed Tutu Atwell, so we at least have some people to throw to. Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku is at least a solid duo to start, but still a ton of holes on the offensive side of the ball, especially. Let's talk about Glenn Davis, who I really wanted the opportunity to take, just could not do it. He's a 74 overall hidden development quarterback. He has that ideal sense of pressure, does have conservative decision maker instead of ideal, so that hurts him a little bit. But 93 throw power, all of his accuracies pretty solid. 80 throw under pressure, 82 break sack, pretty good athlete as well. I think Glenn Davis is gonna be a pretty good quarterback for the New York Giants going forward. I think they're going to be happy with that selection. They had no quarterbacks heading into the draft, so there's really no way they weren't going to take Glenn Davis. I was hopeful, but they took him. Levi Stark ended up going the pick after us to the Las Vegas Raiders. He ends up being just a 73, so that's not much different, just 1 overall lower. 94 throw power. His accuracies actually look pretty solid. Oblivious sense of pressure and conservative decision maker is really what gave me pause pre-draft on this guy, and why I think there's a chance that he won't end up being a hit for the Raiders. You could certainly argue that going into this year with Levi Stark instead of Deshaun Watson and Snell is a big time improvement. I can't argue with that. I think Stark would be the best quarterback in the room. Would we have drafted him? But to force quarterback in year 1 of a rebuild is something that I think can get you into trouble. And so I'm not mad at not forcing it there in this spot. The other quarterback to go was Paul Kirkland, who also comes in at a 73 overall. He is normal development. Once again, oblivious sense of pressure and conservative decision maker. Everyone was a conservative decision maker. His short accuracy is really good. The same situation as the Raiders quarterback. Could this guy have worked? Yes. Would he have been the best quarterback in the room for us next season? Yes, he would have been. But would he be a franchise quarterback? I don't know. And for me, it's more important to take a franchise quarterback. I do think, Glenn Davis has a really good chance of being a franchise quarterback. And so I would have taken him. I think it would have been a solid pick, even though, of course, he's 4 overall lower than the guy that we did eventually get. Looks like we know Gibson is the number 2 player in the class. The number 1 player is James Minor, the other edge rusher we had under consideration. He has 84 finesse moves and 86 speed. So, yes, he's only a finesse rusher, but he's really, really good at it already. So that'll be a fun thing to see who ends up having a better career between James Minor and Daniel Gibson, the 2 best edge rushers in this class. He had a really good defensive tackle here in Tremaine Wall. Should have had him on the board. I think the fact that he was 23 scared me off a bit, but this guy looks like a really solid interior prospect for Jacksonville. Let's go ahead and take a look at what happened in our division. So the Bengals get 4 players 70 plus overall. So they got Denard Smith. He was on our board, and he ends up being a 70 overall. 99 spec catch. Maybe we should have drafted him. Doesn't have a lot of speed at all. Route running is only okay. Can't have a, he's 6'2", 214 pounds, and he doesn't have any release packages. So he's certainly a limited player in some aspects. That 99 spec catch is carrying that overall as well. Everything else that you see here is kind of mid 60s-ish. But of course, that 99 spec catch is really cool for Cincinnati. They got Hugh Davis to add to their offensive line. Good pass protector. Not a great athlete and probably will never be a positive asset in the run game. But the main thing you're focusing on is, of course, protecting Joe Burrow. Morgan Quick is pretty solid here. 74 hidden dev. So, pretty decent receiver. Didn't think he was, you know, maybe a round 2 kind of guy, maybe more round 3 just with his route running, but that was kind of the problem I had with the entire class. Logan Capobianco was their first round pick, 79 speeds, 89 strength, and 76 power moves. So another end that has the strength to maybe go inside, much like our own pick that we had earlier on in the round. So let's go ahead and move on to the Ravens, see what they did in our division. They got their first 3 picks at 70 plus overalls. They got Carlos Castillo. So the whole division going offensive line here in round 1 and getting some hidden development players. So we'll see. Did I say offensive line or defensive line? I can't remember. Obviously defensive line. Julian Moran here. Good zone safety. Doesn't offer much in the way of man coverage, but good addition to the secondary for Baltimore. And then Joey Tolliver will be a solid offensive lineman for them as well. They have Linderbaum, so I don't think they really need center, but he's a cool player. Steelers, last team in our division. They only got 1 player at 70 plus overall, but Trayvon Harris ends up being 75. This is pretty solid. And maybe I was a little bit too down on the receiver class. They didn't look that good, but there's some solid players going here in our division. He is 23 years old. I typically try to avoid, unless somebody's like insanely good, then I'll draft a 23-year-old, you know. But pretty good receiver prospect to pair it with George Pickens for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that'll wrap up our draft portion of this episode. That's going to bring us here to the end of the preseason, where we simulated everything, simulated training camp as well. And I tried to get even splits for Snell and Watson in these games, but for some reason Watson had to over double the attempts of Snell. Don't know why, but here are some of the numbers. And as we get to the end of this episode, which will be me doing the upgrades that we got throughout the preseason and training camp, I want to hear your thoughts. Who should start game 1? Deshaun Watson at a 71 overall. Here are his ratings. We all know the other reasons to start and not start Deshaun Watson, but again, I do not want to get into that here in a series where I'm playing Madden, playing a video game here. Or Sean Snell here, who will get an upgrade. But as of right now, here are his ratings as a rookie, both normal, development. Let me know who you would start in the comments section below. Otherwise, I'll just make the decision myself. But let's finish off the episode by getting some final upgrades in. Jerry Jeudy has 2 here. And it looks like Playmaker is going back to where it was a couple seasons ago, maybe, where it's by far the best upgrade in the game, although it doesn't really upgrade anything Playmaker style, which is unfortunate. I like to, allow receivers to upgrade their juke and stuff. And you see, I mean, what actually is Playmaker here? Ball carrier vision and carrying is the only thing he upgraded here, but look at all the actual receiver upgrades you get. It's just by far the best upgrade. Once again, in Madden, it seems. I haven't been playing Madden this entire time, so I'm learning stuff as I play this series. So it looks like Playmaker will be pretty much all of my wide receiver upgrades, because you're just nerfing yourself if you don't. Now, Greg Newsome, I have a motivation to get him to 87 overall so that we can try and re-sign him this offseason period. I don't know if we'll even have the money to, but in case we do, I just want to make sure that he's going up in overall every single time. So we'll do this here. I am going to risk, because I feel like slot almost has more of a chance of upgrading you 2 overall in man-to-man than it does 0. So we will risk it here. And I think that worked. Now he's a base 86. Let's go. So he only needs 1 more upgrade, and then we'll have the ability to re-sign him, which is certainly something that I'm going to try to do. If I can make the money work, we're going to make the money work. Number 3 overall pick, Daniel Gibson. We could go dual power rusher here, and then if he gets to 80 overall, we can get a sneak peek as to if he has superstar or X factor. We'll go 1 power moves here. I wanted to get him to 80 power moves, but the second one, we really got to upgrade run stopper here for him to be a more complete player. That +2 block shed will get him in up to 70. So we got 2 kind of milestones. We got into the 70s block shedding and the 80s power move. Didn't quite get to know what his development is, but he's only 52 snaps away from learning what his development is. So we're not going to have to wait too much longer. I'd rather develop him where he needs development than learn his development a little sooner. Jerome Ford, at this point in his career, I don't think it's really worth trying to make him a well-balanced player. He's not going to develop a ton from here on out, so let's just make him good at what he's good at. I know he's only 25 years old, but at running back with normal dev, it's just going to be tough for him going forward. Lance Linton, good pass protection to start. I'd like to maybe boost 1 of each in the run blocking category here. He ends up with +2 pass block instead from that upgrade. We'll go power here with the other one, and +2 run block. There you go. So his base run block grade is all the way up to 78 already, which is nice. Just need to get the power and the finesse up with him. But those are some pretty solid upgrades for our boy. Mohamed Diabate is our 3rd linebacker. Let's do 1 in scheme fit here, and then 1 in pass coverage, I'd say, for Diabate. +2 zone there. He does have star development. He got a end of season development upgrade, which is kind of surprising. We have Cedric Tillman here. Again, we're just going Playmaker. Not only is it our scheme fit, but it is an insane, like +3 deep, +2 medium, +1 spat catch. We actually did get a Playmaker upgrade with +2 spin move, but really good upgrade there. Sean Snell, let's see what he upgrades with here. I'm gonna go improviser on this one because that'll help his throw on the run and throw under pressure. I think he does get +2 throw on the run and some accuracy boosts there. Not throw under pressure. I mean, 69 is obviously nice, but I feel like you want it to be better. DeJuan Jones, the big man, could be taken over for Jack Conklin someday if we don't draft somebody. He's face scanned into the game. That's kind of cool. I didn't know that was the case. And then last, and certainly probably least as well, we got Corey Bjorkes. He has a pretty strong legs. So let's boost accuracy. He already has 97 kick power. So really good punter, but not too interested in the punter here. That's going to lead us to week 1. Again, let me know who should be our quarterback in week 1. I mean, the real answer is Glenn Davis, who you see pictured here on the right, who just had an insane game 3. Looks really good in the preseason so far. Add an insult to injury that we could not draft him. But of the options we actually have available, who would you start at quarterback? That's all I've got here for the episode. We'll be back to start the regular season in our next episode, and I'll see you then.